Thank you very much and welcome everyone. My name is John Rankin. I'm a business systems analyst and have been for over 30 years, but I've also studied people relationships, which I've done for approximately 20 years. So today I'm giving a presentation on diversity and inclusion with a slight difference. So I'm talking about diversity with inclusion rather than diversity and inclusion, because as far as I'm concerned, diversity without inclusion is just doomed to failure. So in the talk, we look at the main points, the main challenges of diversity and inclusion. We look at why the difficulty, and we'll offer a new approach to actually getting more success with a different methodology of inclusion. So diversity with inclusion can be said that diversity is a representation and inclusion is a feeling. Now, what do I mean by that? Diversity is who at work. So it's who is recruited, who is hired, who is promoted. It really is the representation of the range of traits and experiences in a company's workforce, rather than anything else. These, needless to say, include gender, race, religion, but they also include thought, experiences, and values. As the Gallup organization says, the full spectrum of human demographic differences. So now let's look at inclusion. And why do I say inclusion is a feeling? Because it's how people feel at work. Do they feel safe? Do they feel welcome? Do they feel valued? Even, do they feel respect, accepted, encouraged to fully participate? So you can't have one really without the other, and it has to be with rather than and. They're not separate. So you can have people with difference that will speak up, that will speak out, that will express their differences. Everyone wants to be unique. We don't want to be all mini-me's or carbon copies of someone else. As they say, you have to be yourself because everyone else is taken. So really, I mean, if you're looking at, say, extroverts, you'd have the like of people who stick up their hand and say, yeah, I'm different, you know, and you get the likes of RuPaul. But then you get the introvert who would be, you know, living their life very quiet, unassuming, and that could be, say, for example, Philip Schofield, who's the TV presenter. So you get the different aspects, and some people want to speak out, other people don't. So really, where do we start? The only place to start that I have found over the last number of years is with top management. And then with all other managers within the organization, making them more responsible and accountable for this diversity. And it'll become clear why this is important. I don't start with HR, because if you don't have top management on board, again, it could be deemed ineffective. So implementing diversity and inclusion, you know, what I do is I review the existing culture, the existing setup of the company. I get different perspectives. I suggest change, I communicate, and I do all this with the support, as I say, of top management. So again, as I say, why the difficulty? People think of diversity and inclusion as a problem. Okay, the reason resistance to change, hierarchical or outdated thinking, some people call it the old school network or the old school tie. A lack of understanding is a big thing. Fear of the unknown is also very big. But really what it all boils down to is bias and unconscious or subconscious bias. So business issues that are really top of the agenda at the moment, sort of are dealing with internal conflict within the organization, toxic boss. So if one takes internal conflict, between 15 and 40% of a manager's time is taken up with internal conflict. That's a huge waste of money. Toxic bosses or toxic culture, 78% of employees, as polled by Monster, have said that they feel their boss is toxic. They also might say that they micromanage. Business problems are people related. The Harvard Business Review maintains that as much as 80% of business issues or business problems have people relationship issues at the core, and no management training. Okay, so if you don't get trained in how to manage people, that is at least 58% as reported by Forbes through different surveys and everything else. So these are huge issues that one has to deal with before we even get to the diversity issues. So really, the management pressures are achieving a dynamic board, so they need that very competent board. Finding and retaining top talent, diversity is being forced on them, and that is also coming through regulation and corporate governance. Environmental issues, another big thing, which a lot of larger corporations are actually trying to address. And they all want to have a competitive advantage. But in order to do that, they need a diverse team, they need a dynamic board, and they need diversity. So the diversity mix that we're all facing, or we're all being shown, really relates to the bottom line of this picture, which is gender, physical abilities, sexual orientation, age, and of course, culture and race. So this is where the focus is. And I believe that that is incorrect. Because in diversity, a lot of what is seen there is above, the gender, the race, the physical attributes, etc., etc. Much of what is invisible is under the water. And this is where the people have this probation period of 6 months to actually get to know new entrants into the company or new entrants into the team. And in a time of radical change and rapid change, this 6 months really, in some cases, is way too long. So according to leading opinion, for example, I've had conversations with Dame Helena Morrissey, who started up the 30% Club. She says that diversity and in gender in women on boards is actually painfully slow. In some cases, they haven't reached even 25%. She's also said that positive bias is wrong because you're not promoting the best fit for the job. Melissa Scully, who last week was reported in the Irish Independent, actually said, improving diversity on boards must involve more than addressing the lack of female representation. It is not just about increasing gender balance. Ultimate outcomes is about a group that brings a variety of perspectives and exhibits diversity of thinking. So this is very important, and it must follow that diversity of thinking doesn't necessarily have to be in relation to the outward signs of difference. I have also dealt extensively with Dr. Lawrence Crowley, who is ex-KPMG, and also the founder of the Smurfit Business School. And he has written a recommendation, which is up on my website, but he concurs that you have to have this connectivity, this building of relationships in business in order for things to work. There is also a group in America which is called CEOs Action on Diversity and Inclusion. And their pledge is to act on supporting a more inclusive workplace. And they've got over 1,000 businesses and consultancy firms, large known consultancy firms on their books, and that can be checked out on the website. So really, real diversity is about thinking styles, perspectives, experience, and skills, not just gender, because if you look at the outward signs of difference, you can't cover all the bases. You have to have, and it was easy enough to say, right, we're going to pick someone from this particular country. Why? Because they have a different experience or a different perspective on life. But really, what businesses are looking for is a different way of thinking, an agile way of thinking, also logical and everything else. And I'll cover that in a second. So in business, research has shown that loyalty is first to the manager. And this is because the manager controls an employee's forward motion within the company, their growth and their promotion. The second is to co-workers, and then thirdly and finally, it's to the company. And why is this important? Because people do business and want to work with people they know, they like, and ultimately who they trust. And trust goes both ways. So if you don't have trust in management, if you don't like the people you're working with, you're not going to develop this trust. There's always going to be this broken relationships. So the main hurdle really is there's only two reasons why we don't trust people. We either know them or we don't know them. So it's about putting people together who get to know each other, get to like each other, and then ultimately get to trust each other. With that, you actually create a cohesive network. So in this, I just want to demonstrate very quickly an organizational network where the green circle there is showing, here's a central connector. You know, the blue is showing a knowledge broker who's critical joining two groups together, whereas the red is connected to this yellow person who could be a very, very talented and very needed person within the organization. But if red leaves, then yellow is isolated and is outside the group. Ultimately, they will leave. So how do we look at everything? We ask questions of people, which we can do online. It's a very simple questionnaire. It's all emotionally based. So what we're looking at is we're looking at to find out the traits of people, their motivational style, and how they're connected to other people within the group, the team, the board of management, or whatever. So we're looking at this trait analysis. Now, this is a very simplified diagram. Really, this is, if people were in balance and you built a team based on these categories here, the direction of support would be the green arrow. The direction of pressure or conflict would be the purple arrows underneath. And taking that into consideration, the reaction, so from, say, the public relations putting pressure on the organizer or the diplomat, the reaction would be back against. So this is where conflict arises. This is where we find out how the existing team is working, how things are functioning, or if we're creating a new team, how this will play out in the future. So it gives us a idea of what is happening or what is going to happen. So it's very predictive. That said, okay, as I said, this is a very simple model. There are three levels. So when I talk about people being in balance, that is one way a person will feel. If they're under pressure, their personality could shift to something totally different and therefore be in conflict with maybe someone they're normally not in conflict with. But if they go under continual pressure, then we're looking at issues where it involves wellness. It involves, well, who's putting who under pressure? Are they going to walk? Are they going to leave the company? Are they going to go at a critical time? So very much analytical. So I'd like to follow that with an example here where this was a firm of scientists who were environmentally employed and had got a grant from the EU to look at the impact of the environmental impact of businesses, you know, whether the use of stationery or whatever, and their green footprint or lack thereof. So Roger put the team together, and initially he picked Charles and Kira, and then had Olivia as a senior consultant. You can see Olivia and Roger and Charles and Kira are all connected side by side. They then employed Brian, who was a key individual to the team, but he was isolated. There was no connection between Brian and Roger or Brian and Olivia. So Brian would put Roger under pressure, which then meant that Roger would push back, and herein lied the conflict. So when I was talking to them, I was telling them, look, this is what's missing. This is where the communication is breaking down. And this is then how to fix the issue. So this could be a board of management, you know, and one could look at the likes of Independent News and Media, where the chairman and the CEO were at total loggerheads. And as a result, it was played out in the media, which had an impact on the actual share price and the way people looked at the business. So really, you know, as long as you know how things are playing out, you can then build, you can then promote, you can then say, yeah, well, look at this is what you're missing. But it doesn't matter, you know, the race, color, or creed. If there's no connectivity, people won't like each other, there will be conflict, and the thing will ultimately fall apart. So we look at the differences. So a lot of people think that what I do is psychometric testing. It's not. It is part of psychometrics, but psychometrics is about the individual assessment. It's self-reporting. So they're looking at skills, knowledge, abilities, personal traits, education, and behavior. Whereas what I'm doing is I'm identifying and comparing, using personal trait analysis, the relationship between people. So it's who influences us, where we exert influence on others, our traits and our strengths, our motivational style, our stress perception, which is either imbalance, under stress, or under continual stress. And it's all done in a very unbiased manner. So we're not looking at saying, oh, we have to put this person in because of their color, their creed, or whatever, because that will create resentment within the existing team or board or wherever. Now, the funny thing is that the central bank are also promoting the difference in thought, the relationship between people. They're picking on a system that was developed by the Dutch central bank so that they get better corporate governance, they get better diversity and inclusion. And it's all on the website of the central bank. But whatever the central bank do, other regulators will actually ultimately do once they see how things are playing out and how they're reacting. So we're giving you 2020 vision, this prediction, you know, where you know how a team links together currently, but also if someone new comes in or someone leaves or retires, you will also know how a team will work together in the future. And then you can create this very, very balanced, you know, as in nature, nature has a balance. So creating a balanced team means it'll work far better. So we're giving you a clear path to solutions. We're showing you, okay, well, what is there, what can be achieved, and how to do it. We're giving you an absolute methodology that for the last 20 years I've been using to a tremendous success. So as the picture here says, diversity may be said to resemble the pieces of a puzzle, each unique, yet each essential to bring that. So knowing how people fit together is the key. Thank you very much. My name is John Rankin, and if you've any questions, I'd be delighted to answer and share my knowledge with you.